Welcome back to Yehoshua's Daf Yomi Shiur, where the Daf continues daily until the complete revelation of Mashiach ben David. Today we will be looking at Tractate Chullin, page 77. 77a, top of the page. Nimnin Alehen Bepesach. If you want to get the context in the previous, please see 76b in the previous video. Nimnin Alehen Bepesach. Ve'oda Torah Chasa Al Mimonim She'Yisrael. One may be registered as part of a group that will eat the Paschal offering on their account, even if those sinews are the only part of the lamb he will eat. The only part of the lamb he will eat. Evidently, such sinews are regarded as flesh. And furthermore, the Torah spared the money of the Jewish people, and one must tend toward leniency. Amar le Rav Papa le Rabbo Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish ve'isura de'iraiso ve'at amrit mai lechush lehu ishtik. Rav Papa said to Rabbi, but Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan and holds that one may not be registered for those sinews, as they will eventually harden and therefore not considered flesh. Therefore, the broken bone in this case is not covered by flesh, and the animal is prohibited by Torah law as a treifa. And yet, you say, what concern is there with the sinews in this case? Rabbah was silent. V'amai ishtik ve'omarava hilchasa kavasei Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish b'hani tlas. The Gemara asks, and why was Rabbah silent? But doesn't Rabbah say that the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish in his disputes with Rabbi Yochanan only with regard to these three matters? Meaning, three matters that are mentioned in Yevamot 36a and not in other cases? If so, Rabbah could simply have replied that the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish with regard to this issue. Shani hacha dahadar be Rabbi Yochanan legabe Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish di amar le al tikniteni b'lashon yachid ani shone osa. The Gemara answers here with regard to sinews that will ultimately harden, it is different. As Rabbi Yochanan retracted his ruling in favor of the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, as when Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish raised a difficulty against Rabbi Yochanan's opinion, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, do not provoke me by asking questions to refute my opinion that the fact that the sinews will ultimately harden is disregarded, as I teach it in an explanation of a lone opinion. See Psachim 84a. Even Rabbi Yochanan conceded that the opinion he expressed was only according to one sage, but it is not the halacha. Ahu nishbar ha'etzim v'yotze lachutz li'ish tekelu kurtisa minei asa lekamre de'abaye sheheye telasa regele. The Gemara relates, there was a certain case in which a bone in an animal's leg broke and protruded outward. This bone was mostly covered with flesh and skin, but a small piece, a kurtita, of bone had been removed from it. The case came before Abaye, who delayed his response until 3 pilgrimage festivals had passed. Then the sages gathered together, and he could ask them. Amrle Rav Ada bar Masna, Zil Kamed Rav Abarei Rav Yosef bar Chama, De Charifa Sekine Asa Lekame, Amar Mechde Nishbar Etzem Vyasa Lachutz, Tanan, Ma Li Nafal, Ma Li Ise. Rav Ada bar Matana said to the owner of the animal, go before Rava, son of Rav Yosef bar Chama, whose knife is sharp, meaning he has insight into halachic matters and decides matters quickly, and ask him to decide your case. The owner came before Rava to seek his opinion. Rava said to him, since we learned in the Braita on 76b, if the bone broke and protruded outward, if skin and flesh cover a majority of the bone in the animal is permitted. What difference is there to me if the bone fell out, and what difference is there to me if it is in place? In either case, the animal is permitted. Amar le Ravina le Rave mislakit mahu misroises mahu mismas meis mahu hechi demei mismas meis. Amar Rav Huna berei de Rav Yehoshua kol sheroife kodro. With regard to a case where flesh covers the majority of a broken bone, Ravina said to Rava, if the flesh was torn in pieces and spread over the area, and if gathered it would constitute a majority, what is the halacha? Similarly, if the flesh was pulverized and thin, what is the halacha? If it was decomposed, what is the halacha? The Gemara asks, what are the circumstances of this case in which the flesh is decomposed? Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, said, this is referring to any kind of flesh that the doctor cuts away and removes to enable the surrounding area to heal. Ibaylahu, nikav mahu, niklaf mahu, nizdak mahu, nital shlish hatachton mahu. A dilemma was raised before the sages. If the flesh that covers the bone was perforated, what is the halacha? Likewise, if the flesh was peeled off the bone, what is the halacha? If it was cracked, what is the halacha? If the bottom third of the width of the flesh, meaning the part that is adjacent to the bone, was removed, what is the halacha? Tashima. De Amr Ula Amr Rav Yochanan or Harehu Kebasor Dilma Dikna Mashka Dide. The Gemara suggests coming here, as Ula says, that Rabbi Yochanan says skin is like flesh. This would appear to indicate that any covering is sufficient. The Gemara refutes this proof. Perhaps Rabbi Yochanan was referring to a specific case where there was never flesh on the bone, but only skin. For example, adjacent to the knee, where the skin holds its own place close to the bone. This ruling may not apply in an area where there was flesh. Perhaps in such a place the bone must be covered by flesh that is still healthy. Amar Rav Ashi ki havinen be Rav Papi ibayela niktar kimin tabas mahu upashtena maha de Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav davar ze sha'alti lechachamim ולרויפים ואמרו מסרטו בעצם ומעלה ארוכה אבל פרזלה מזרף זריף אמר רב פאפה והוא דקנה גרמה דידי. Rav Ashi said, while we were studying in Rav Papi's study hall, we raised a dilemma. If the flesh and skin were cut in the shape of a ring around the break, and yet most of the circumference of the bone is surrounded by flesh, what's the halacha? And we resolve this dilemma from this statement that Rav Yehuda says, that Rav says, I asked about this matter to the sages and to the doctors what to do when a bone breaks and the surrounding flesh has been cut away. And they said one makes an incision in it with a sharp piece of bone to help the blood flow and then congeal. And in this manner, the wound will heal. The Gemara notes, but one should not make the incision with an iron implement, as it will cause inflammation. Rav Papa said, and this advice should be implemented only in the case where one can see that the bone is holding firmly onto its flesh, as only in such a case will the flesh heal. Nu Mishneh. Zog de heilige Mishneh, Ashochet des HaBehema. ומצא בה שיליה נפש היפה תאכלנו ואינו מטעם לו תומאס או אכלין ולא תומאס נבי אלוהיס חישב עליה מטעם תומאס או אכלין אבל לא בתומאס נבי אלוהיס. In the case of one who slaughters an animal and finds a placenta in its womb, one with a hearty soul, meaning one who is not repulsed by it, may eat it. It's nasty, but whatever. They call it a hearty soul. Nefesh hayafa. They eat it, and its consumption was permitted by virtue of the slaughter of the mother. Nevertheless, since generally speaking, people do not consume such placentas, it is not regarded as food, and so it cannot become impure with ritual impurity of food, even if it were to come in contact with the source of impurity. And furthermore, it does not impart the ritual impurity of animal carcasses, as was permitted by virtue of the slaughter of the mother. But if one intended to eat it, one thereby elevated it to a status of food, and the placenta becomes impure with the ritual impurity of food if it comes into contact with a source of impurity. But even so, it still does not impart the ritual impurity of animal carcasses. Shil yeshiyat samiksa siman vlad isha siman vlad bebehima. With regard to placenta, part of which emerged from the womb before the mother was slaughtered, its consumption is prohibited even after the mother animal was slaughtered, because the emergence of the placenta is an indication of a fetus in a woman and an indication of a fetus in an animal. Accordingly, there is a concern that the head of the fetus might have emerged in that part of the placenta, thereby rendering the fetus as having been born, a status that precludes it from being permitted by the slaughter of its mother. Since the offspring is prohibited, its placenta is likewise prohibited. Hama mavakeres shehi pilo shilyo yashlicheno lichlovim uvemukdashim tikovel vein koivren oiso v'pashas drochim vein toilen oiso be'ilon mipnei darchei ha'emori. If an animal that was giving birth to its firstborn expelled the placenta, one may cast it to the dogs, and one does not need to be concerned about the concern the placenta came from a male fetus that has the consecrated status of a firstborn. But in the case of sacrificial animals, the placenta must be buried because it came from a fetus that is assumed to have been sacred. The Mishnah adds, but if one may neither bury it at an intersection nor may one hang it on a tree, superstitious rites intended to prevent the animal from miscarrying again due to the prohibition against following the ways of the Amorite, which prohibits Jews from practicing the superstitious rites observed by Gentiles. That's the Mishnah. Now the Talmud. Zog the Heilige Talmud, Menani Mili Ton Rabbanan Kol Behema Toichelu. Kol Behema Toichelu, it says in brackets. The rabbi says a Shilya. Yochel if you do something to us, Tamiloim al Oiso V'Roi Shilyoso. With regard to the ruling that placenta is permitted by virtue of the mother's slaughter, the Gemara asks, from where is this matter derived? As the sages taught, and every animal that parts the hoof has the hooves wholly cloven in two, and chews the cud of the animals, it you may eat. Deuteronomy 14:6. The verse is the source of the halakha that a fetus is permitted by virtue of the mother's slaughter. See 69:8. The word every at the beginning of the verse serves to include the placenta as well as the fetus. One might have thought that a placenta is permitted even if part of it emerged from the womb before slaughter. Therefore, the verse states, if you may eat it, you may eat, meaning you may eat it, the slaughtered animal, but not its placenta, if it partially emerged. Mechti, let us see, ain't shilib vlad v'lamalikra kras machli alma. The Gemara objects. Now, the assumption is that there is no placenta without a fetus. Therefore, if part of the placenta emerged, there is a concern that the head of the fetus might have emerged in that part of the placenta, thereby rendering the fetus as having been born. Such a status would preclude it from being permitted by the slaughter of its mother. Why do I need such a verse to teach us? The Gemara explains the verse is a mere support for the halacha, but not the source of it. Or chamor shishelakuma hulamai. The Mishnah states, and a placenta found inside a slaughtered animal cannot become impure with the ritual impurity of food, and does not impart the ritual impurity of animal carcasses. In a related discussion, Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Nachman raised a dilemma: a donkey hide that one cooked and it became softened. What is its halachic status? The Gemara asks, with regard to what issue did he raise the dilemma? If it was with regards to ritual and purity of food, we already learned this halacha in a brayta. Turning now to 77b, top of the page. And if you say that it was with regard to ritual purity of animal carcasses, we already learned that halacha as well in another brayta. Okay, we'll stop here and pick it up with 77b.